Good day to all you lovely people watching my video. This is my mid lane guide, part 4, creep block mechanics. So creep block is one of the most undervalued mechanics in the sub 4K bracket. In this video, I will go over the importance of creep block, when to implement it and when not to, how to abuse a good creep block, and how to deal with a better creep block from an enemy. So what is a creep block and its importance? Why is it important? Creep block means to walk in front of your creeps to slow them down. Let's have a quick look
Game is
before we
on.
continue. Yes, this is me
I'll take that
Well,
as
that's
tribute.
it. The secret is out.
playing against bots
Radiant on one side, dire on the other.
with my awesome TA set. Right. So that is the gist of the creep block. Now, this is not an ideal creep block. And the reason why this is not an ideal creep block is because all of the enemy melee creeps, manage to get on top of the high ground, and we'll discuss why this is important. But just note that the enemy now has a vision of me on the high ground, has vision of the high ground because the enemy creeps have managed to get on the high ground. A perfect creep block will look something like this. So from the dire has a perfect creep block. All of the dire creeps, all of the dire melee creeps are slightly on the steps, just below the high ground, and all of my melee creeps are definitely on the low ground. So I actually do not have high ground vision. I do not know where the enemy is, his positioning, or anything like that. So going back to the creep block, right? So in mid, your creep wave meets the enemy creep wave at exactly 18 seconds after spawn. However, if you can slow down your wave by about 1 second, the enemy wave will travel 1 second further and meet yours on your high ground. Of course, if the enemy is also blocking, then you want to block 1 second more than the enemy to have the ideal block. So why is the block important? There are several benefits to having a better creep block than the enemy. The main goal is to get the two waves to meet in such a way that all of the enemy creeps are on the low ground and your creeps are on the steps of the river. Your range creep will be on the high ground. Even if all of your melee creeps are on the high ground, it's fine as long as the enemy creeps are not on the high ground. The enemy creeps have to be on the low ground, and once again, it's because you don't want the enemy to get vision on your high ground. So why is this beneficial? Why is a good creep block beneficial? First off, you get a better right click trade with your opponent if you want to harass. This is obviously very beneficial in every scenario, harassing the enemy. But even more so if the enemy is stronger than you. When you right click trade with the enemy, you're on the high ground, they're on the low ground. They have a 25% uphill miss chance, allowing you to win the trade every single time. Similarly, even if they have higher right click damage than you. Similarly, if your creeps, um, because your creeps will be on the high ground, the enemy has a chance of missing last hits because of once again the uphill miss chance. If you get a good block and the enemy creeps are not on the high ground, then the enemy will not have vision of you, allowing you to play in the dark. Meaning he will not know your positioning, will not be able to land skill shots on you, and allowing you to land skill shots on him with much more ease because the enemy will not see it coming. And this is not just skill shots, it's also in the instance of, let's say, Queen of Pain versus a Puck, or Queen of Pain versus a TA. A Puck and we're talking about dagger, for instance. When Queen of Pain or any projectile like the Queen of Pain's dagger, when a Queen of Pain throws out the dagger, right, the Puck can phase shift out, the TA can use her mild to dodge it. But if the Queen of Pain is playing in the dark and the Puck and or the TA and the enemy basically does not see the dagger actually leaving Queen of Pain and coming, they have almost it's almost impossible to dodge that dagger. Puck slightly easier because it's a bit more range and positioning and whatnot, but I don't want to get into. The point being, playing in the dark is a super important concept in specific matchups. Just as I said, Queen of Pain versus Puck or TA or other matchups that I can't really think of at the moment. But let's continue. Playing in the dark will also make it harder for the enemy to creep aggro. The importance of creep aggro and what how to do it and everything we will discuss in a later video. So I don't want to talk about that in this series. But just know that playing in the dark makes it really really hard to creep aggro. um, Playing in the dark also helps you when you want to harass, especially if the enemy comes too close to you or the creep wave. You just harass away because your creeps will be closer to him than his creeps to you. So once again, a better trade for you because your creeps are going to be hitting him while you're hitting him, and the only damage you're taking is the damage from the enemy. And when we're talking about the trade, this is on top of the uphill miss chance. So hands down, the trade is just going to be fantastic for you. Better block allows you to maintain creep equilibrium and high ground if you want to, of course. Benefits of those later in the series, as there are much more detailed aspects. The creep equilibrium and all that. That's later in the series. Okay, so all of this is fantastic for every hero, but this is especially important now. This is this is actually core if you're a melee hero against a ranged hero, or really any difficult matchup. In fact, if I know I'm a melee hero against a ranged hero, if I'm going to have a difficult matchup, I actually don't even bother going for the rune. Instead, I go to my T3 and just get a much better creep block, just like I showed in the previous slide. The rune will give me 100 gold. A good creep block will allow me to have good control of creep equilibrium, allowing me to farm the entire first two waves, which is 320 gold, which I will not be able to get if I did not get a good creep block. Of course, also not just 320 gold, but also levels, experience. I would not get, well, kind of, in denying and all that, so let's not get into it too much. But point being, 100 gold from the rune versus two entire creep waves, which is 320 gold. Not to mention, um, the enemy will not be able to harass me as much because he won't control the high ground. I will control the high ground. And as a melee, you're not really harassing the enemy, but because he doesn't control the high ground, you will not be getting harassed by the enemy. So I only consider two creep waves here, when we say benefit, because by two waves you can usually reset the third one by pushing out the second wave and immediately walking back to block the oncoming creeps. But I think I've already made this a little bit too complicated. The gist of it is, if you're a melee hero, you have to ensure a good creep block so you can get quick level 2 or 3. You can ensure, yeah, that you have a decent laning, a good laning phase. By the way, if you get a bit confused with what I'm saying, or if something doesn't make sense, just go to the description, go to the link that I've provided for the entire script. I've actually written this entire mid lane guide, so just go and read that. Or if you don't want to hear my annoying voice, just go and have a read of the mid lane guide. It's exactly the same material. This is just video form, and that's written form. So, all right, moving forward. So, how do you deal with a better creep block? Of course, the enemy might get a better block than you, so you don't want to have the disadvantage. So, how do you deal with a better creep block? Really, the best way to deal with a better creep block is creep aggro. We'll go over how to creep aggro in detail in a later video because it's, believe me, it's a very long topic. But when you creep aggro, you right click the enemy hero, any enemy hero on the map, and this pulls the enemy creep wave over to you, aggros to you. You want to do this to pull the enemy creeps from their high ground onto the river, allowing you and your enemy both to have an equal standing, as both yours and his creeps will be in the river. A small tip here is that since the enemy will be in the dark, it won't be possible to aggro using the enemy mid laner. So you will have to right click on an enemy hero in another lane. Just don't try to get onto his high ground to creep aggro, because then you will take tons of harass from the enemy. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen this in my coaching. People in the 3K, higher 3K, even 4K bracket, they just walk straight up onto the high. I've even seen that in my games. People just walk straight up onto the high ground to creep aggro using the enemy mid, and they just take like 200 ish damage from the enemy just because they wanted to creep aggro. It's just not worth it. Just use a different enemy from a different lane. Anyway, moving on to the next point, another way to deal with a better creep block is to nuke the wave. And you want to nuke it almost immediately. A good practice is to use your nuke to get the first last hit while harassing the enemy with your nuke as well. This is using your abilities to the most efficient, and it will allow you to kill the enemy creep wave quickly. Then you have to walk back and quickly block the next wave. This will allow you to have the second wave meet at your high ground if you manage to get a good block. But at worst, this will land both the waves in the river, even if you didn't get a fantastic block, which is still better than on the enemy high ground. After which, you can use creep aggro to actually pull the creeps further up onto your high ground, or onto your step. Note here, you should essentially move back every single time and block every single creep wave if possible, even if it's like 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes into the game. You should always, in the mid lane, you should always, as soon as the creep wave dies, if you're not pulling, if you're not going for the river rune, just go back and block the creep wave so that you can have an ideal or a better creep wave positioning. Okay, so next slide is why not to let the range creep through. So when creep blocking, it's quite common to see very high level players letting the ranged creep go through first. Contrary to popular belief, it is not always good to let the range creep through, and here are the reasons why. If you let the range creep through, it'll obviously die first, and it'll die very quickly. You will have three creeps while the enemy has four. This allows the enemy to have a creep advantage and better right click trade with you if he decides to start harassing you, which is what you should do if your enemy lets the range creep die first. If you have a creep advantage, go and harass him. First thing to note here, that if you actually get a great block and your creep wave is on your high ground, despite having a creep advantage, enemy will not have better right click trade because of uphill miss. However, in the case the creep wave meets in the river, or worse on the enemy high ground, letting the range creep go through first will actually be horrible for you, because not only does the enemy now have high ground advantage, he also has um, a creep advantage. So you're basically screwed. So you might get double waved. That's the second thing. You might get double waved, and this is actually literally the most important reason. The range creep deals the most damage. If it dies first and quickly, then the enemy creeps are taking much less damage. By the time your entire creep wave has died, two of the enemy creeps will still be alive, and by that time, the next creep wave will have arrived. Early on, this is really, really bad for you, as firstly, the wave will push under your tower, making it, you know, hard to last it under the tower. But if you want to avoid that, if you want to avoid getting all the creeps under your tower, then you will have to tank the creep wave, which means taking a lot of damage. Not to mention, the enemy mid might see you doing this and jump at the opportunity to harass you even further. So, to rectify this, you need to make sure you maintain creep equilibrium by either right clicking the enemy creep wave down quickly to match the trying to match the number of creeps number of your creeps that have died. Also, obviously, trying to kill enemy creep wave at the same time as your creep wave ends, or nuking the creep wave down. So basically, you want to use your right clicks or your spells to make sure that you have as many creeps as the enemy, so that you don't get double waved. Of course, this does not work if you don't have a nuke, or if you can't come in range of the creep wave in a melee versus range situation, or if your right clicks are shit, like in a sniper's case. So really, that's the biggest reason why you should not let the range creep through first. Again, using your nuke to get the first last hit and harass the enemy is the best thing to do. I keep putting this point again and again, because people really, really need to start doing this. If you have a nuke, and if you want to nuke a creep to get the last hit, make goddamn sure that you harass the enemy while you do that. Don't waste your spells. Okay, so note that I did not advise killing the enemy range creep, right? To maintain creep equilibrium when your range creep dies first. Usually, if you try to do this, the enemy will actually end up denying the range creep very, very easily. So you're gonna have to kill the melee creeps quickly. Not Don't try to harass or hit the range creep. All right, third point. As we said, the range creep deals the most damage in a creep wave. So naturally, a good trick is to last hit. A good trick to last hitting is to time your last hits just before or after the range creep's projectile. If the range creep is not there, you will not only have some difficulty last hitting normally, but biggest issue is that the enemy will actually have a much easier time denying the creeps that you want to go for. So if you're going to have less damage than the enemy, this is the important part. If you are going to have less damage than the enemy, right click damage, you really do not want to let the range creep through. For example, if you're an SF, do not let the range creep go through. Um, yeah, okay, so why do high level players actually let the range creep go through first? Well, there are several occasions when you definitely want to let the range creep go through first. Keep in mind that this is specifically only for the mid lane. All right. This has nothing to do with the safe lane or the off lane. In safe lane, off lane, you always want to get the range creep to go first because you actually want it to die and you actually want the wave to be pushed into your tower, but not in the mid lane. You don't want to farm under the tower. Anyway, um, so why do high level players actually let the range creep through? What are the occasions? So first off, when you're guaranteed to have more right click damage than the enemy. For example, if you're laning against an SF, so it's the opposite. SF doesn't want to let the range creep through, but you again laning against an SF 100% do. Or generally when you have higher damage, like when you're tiny, or if you're a treant in mid, or if you're just super confident that you are just a superior last hitter, but maybe don't be overconfident. Second point, when you know you're a really good creep blocker and can let the range creep through at the very last second, so that your wave is on the steps or on your high ground. Make sure to either right click the wave down or nuke the wave to ensure you maintain creep equilibrium and don't get double wave. Now, important thing to note here, if you don't have a nuke, then don't do this because you won't be able to nuke the creep wave down. Or also, if you don't have a nuke, you can say, hey, I can right click the creep wave down. But what if you can't? What if you're a melee hero against a range hero, and if you're standing there right clicking the wave down, you're gonna get harassed. Even though it's an uphill mischance, you're not trading with the enemy. So you have to keep these things in mind. To try to understand when you will get double wave and try to make sure that you have the tools to deal with the double wave, whether it be a poor man's shield, a stout shield, or whether it be a nuke or right click damage or whatever. Okay, third point, when you actually want to get double waved and farm under your tower. Now, this is a fantastic tip when you that you want to learn right now on how to deal with a tough matchup. When you're up against a Viper or a hero matchup that you're definitely going to lose. You're supposed to lose that matchup. Let the range creep through. Right click your own creeps to make them die even faster if you can. Get double wave and farm safely under your tower without getting harassed. This is like, especially if you're a melee versus Viper, a Queen of Pain, or what's his name, Razor, any matchup that you're supposed to lose, right? Just get double waved, farm under your own tower. This is, of course, true when you want to get a level 2 as well, which will help you survive the rest of the lane. For example, TA versus Queen of Pain. Now, TA wants to get level 2 to have an okay laning phase against Queen of Pain. So you get double wave this way and get a really, really quick level 2 without taking any harass from Queen of Pain. Even if you want to get a level 3 really fast, in the case of Huskar, who wants to get a really quick level 3 so that he can have level 2 burning spears and boom, 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 wreck you. Okay, so fourth point is when there is actually a roaming hero like Bounty Hunter or Ricky or any of those annoying people, you really need the wave to be as bloody close to your tower as possible. In other words, maintaining high ground is super important. Of course, then you want to make sure to tank the wave and not let it die under your own tower. Um, you just want to maintain high ground. So a stout shield is quite important in this situation. So when there's a roaming hero, you kind of want to think about this situation. There are other ways to deal with it, which is something that we will discuss, something we will go over the maintaining high ground topic, maintaining high ground video. All right, that brings us to the end of this video. To summarize, ideally you want the creep wave to be at your high ground. If it's on the enemy high ground, use creep aggro to pull it to the river or nuke the wave down and try to block the next wave. If it's in the river, you can creep aggro to pull it up. You can try to outplay the opponent by denying with right click and last hitting with your nuke, something we will discuss in the opener. Which is probably, I think, is the next video. At the end of the day, the most important message is creep block is extremely crucial in winning the mid lane. Practice it, understand it, get to know it, spend however long it takes to get the perfect creep block every single. Now, getting the perfect creep block is difficult, but understand how to creep block and don't take this lightly. Pre block is extremely important. Practice it in a lobby with a friend till it becomes muscle memory, and then go in, apply it in a real game, and be surprised by how well you do without even realizing it. And thank me later on for um, increasing your skill and your MMR by doing the smallest things. Now, this is pre block is mostly important when you're in a tough matchup. It's when you're in a better matchup, then creep block actually allows you to exploit that good situation even further. Not something you really need to, but if you have it, then, it's, yeah, happy days. Good for you. Good for you. The thank you sign is there. You should be shutting this window down by now. I don't know why you still have it up, honestly. One thing I keep forgetting to put in my videos is that I will be giving away a set with each one of these videos on my mid lane. Um, Last time I gave a legendary. I keep forgetting if it was a legendary or mythical set to one person. This time it won't be mythical or legendary. I don't know. Maybe it will. I probably shouldn't have said that. Now people are not going to be excited about it. Okay, I'll give another mythical or legendary one with this one. God damn it. Uh, now I'm actually happy to give away sets. I'm starting to like this community that's forming on my YouTube channel, and it's growing a lot bigger. I recently reached the 1,000 subs, and that's pretty cool. But yeah, is this the end? Am I done talking? Yeah, I think I'm done talking. Have a good day, guys. Destroy your mid lane, and bye bye.